Welcome to SciTech Culture with Steve Kern and Ben Warner, where we examine science, technology and culture in the 21st century. Visit our website at scitechculture.com. Hello and welcome to SciTech Culture. My name is Ben Warner and I'm joined once again by my good friend and colleague Steve Kern. How are we today, Steve? It's talking about coronavirus again, and I think it might just be the topic du jour for the next little while, considering how things have been escalating in such a short space of time.
Yeah, well, we certainly don't have much else to think about at the moment except self-isolation and keeping distance.
Okay.
So, I think there's probably some positives in this and we should look to them. And, if it leads to a new way of life then and a better way of life, then maybe it's worth all the effort.
Yeah, well, just as on a more comical stance before we get into the more serious stuff, I mean, we can do this sort of thing. It's sort of made for made for this environment. It's interesting watching a lot of the talk shows and that sort of thing doing remote filming of themselves and then editing themselves together. I wonder if that'll be a new norm for television or something.
Geez, Ben, I'll say one thing, okay? It was good to get rid, or get rid of. It was good to separate the people out and have them come in remotely. But, can someone give them some advice about framing their shots?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't work very hard here on STC, but if I was going to be on broadcast television, I'd try a little bit harder. A bit like you. You're well presented. You're looking good. It doesn't do any good to have an expert with their nose in the camera or shooting from underneath or any of those things. So, framing is everything.
Absolutely.
Maybe next week I'll do my hair properly.
Well, we'll make do with what you're looking just as good, so don't worry.
I'm just hoping everyone listens to STC on podcast.
Absolutely. I guess moving away from that, it's I guess kind of important to have a laugh where you can in this kind of environment. Picking up from like what we were talking about last week is just that sense of that tense sort of mode that everyone's kind of descended into, and what was glaring to me this in the last week, just even we're only here last week talking about it, and just in this last week just seeing society shut down in effect. Now in Australia we're not on lockdown yet, but it might as well be in a sense because, walking around the CBD in Melbourne, there's barely anyone on the street anymore, and it's quite clear that the majority of the companies and businesses that operate in the city have just essentially told everyone to go work from home. There was one of the banks, I can't remember which one it was, had I think a scare on Collins Street with one person testing positive in their building, and basically they took the decision to shut it all down and send everyone home as a result of that. So that's the sort of environment that we're working in, and it's just such an extreme impact on everything because there's all those ancillary businesses that are not getting any business at all now. And it's just a sense of dread, I guess, that's descended upon things. And of course, that's not even getting into all the health impacts. So there's the virus itself, people that may potentially be getting sick from it, that have to deal with that. But then there's that just widespread impact over the entire economy. And I guess it just highlights, are we hanging by a bit of a thread or not? Or because obviously it's a serious situation, but for it to all kind of come grinding to a halt the way it has is quite jarring and alarming in a way.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. So, look, I think, between our STC friends and ourselves, I think while the message is that we're taking strong but moderate steps towards, slowing the spread of the virus, the actual fact is we're headed towards a hard shutdown. I don't think they're already pointing in Australia, at least, to pockets of high infection, which sadly for probably Sydney and Melbourne mean at some stage at least parts of the city will be shut down. And I think the messaging generally is trying to be upbeat, but there's no doubt this is really going to change our daily routines to a large extent, and when you think about routine, it can be as simple as where you get a coffee in the morning or the route you take to work. I'm not even talking about your work routines once you get there. I think even working from home, a work routine can be maintained, but the other routines in your day are completely different. And it's this change in routine which I think creates new opportunity, but also, as we know, it creates immense challenges. And we're hearing from business every day, at every level, at every point in the supply chain, that this is causing a lot of stress.
And it's interesting from in terms of having such a the widest impact you can imagine really on the entire society. And if you're talking about things like habits, like you're saying there, or routines, and given the timeframes we're talking about, as they say, it takes 3 weeks to break a habit. And potentially, I was listening to an American news show where they were discussing this actually, and this sort of false sense that things will go back to normal the way it is before. But if you think about it, if you're like you and I, for instance, if we were to, have a beer every Friday night after work, and that was our routine, and
I'm still doing that, Ben.
Absolutely, but say for argument's sake that we were doing that, it was in a crowded group in a pub somewhere, but then you're not doing that anymore, and then all of a sudden it might be that we catch up at each other's places instead, or we catch up virtually, or we do some other activity. They use the example of they go out to a restaurant to have dinner every Saturday night or something. They might decide that they'll cook from home going forward. Now that sounds like it's innocuous and may not necessarily be a big deal, but if you think about that multiplying out to the nth degree, then you're starting to talk about whole businesses, etc., potentially going out of business and whole things changing around it. And I don't think it's alarmist to say some of that stuff, because it's quite conceivable that sort of thing could happen. So
it's already happening. I already know 4 people seriously adversely affected by this slowdown. And, some of them, they're not all casuals, they're subcontracting, they're professionals, and that's it. Lack of movement has basically put a stop on what they do, and that's serious.
Yeah, absolutely. There was also discussion I saw during the week about, I guess, in the post-GFC era. Obviously, the big thing back then was, the fact that how that crisis happened and how everyone got out of it has just, in a sense, kicked the can down the road. And now we're at the point where, okay, the virus has sort of kickstarted that potential thing, but potentially we might have been on that trajectory anyway with the way credit works and the way people are leveraged, not just people but businesses and all that sort of thing. And you have an extreme event like this, shatters confidence across everything, and now we're in real uncharted territory, at least for the time being.
Yeah, look, that's very true. I think that is the point. We are in uncharted territory, but I think people should look to the positives. You don't need to be fearful of your friends. You just need to be careful around them. You can still hang out, especially, outdoors. You can go for a walk in the park together. If there is more room for flexibility in your life and a chance to reevaluate the situation you are in, I think this is the time to do it. I think the good news is while this is going to be very stressful for people in terms of their financial and economic situation, everyone should remember, whether you're immediately affected or will be affected down the line, we're all in this together. So, you're not alone. I think the banks are already doing a good job of trying to reassure us they're not going to wind anyone up in this situation. The government's doing a reasonable job of that as well. So I think now more than ever, wear your heart on your sleeve, see your friends, stay connected. Self-isolation is physical, not emotional. Yeah. And I think that's probably the one message they're not really getting through. Yeah. Just, don't hug and kiss everyone, but don't stay away from each other. This is when we need other people around us and our friends more than ever before.
And I think that's an important point to keep reiterating as much as possible, because not to downplay the seriousness of the coronavirus itself, and the efforts to get on top of it, but in many ways a lot of what's worse in this situation has been the reaction to it, and
that's right.
And that's really where I think we've found ourselves collectively, and I would hope that once we get through all of this, that that's where the lessons learned should really be. Yes, there's it's a serious sort of pandemic, etc., but it needs to be put in its perspective, and I think that idea of a collective response where we look after each other through it is actually key. And as we were talking about last week, obviously not emblematic or descriptive when you actually see things like the panic buying and all that sort of thing, and it's just unfortunate that that's happened. I don't know why, like what sort of set all that off, or whether there's some sort of, who knows what all that is, but hopefully we'll learn a bit out of that and then steer ourselves in the right direction in that regard.
Oh, look, I agree. I mean, on the panic buying, I understand it. And I actually think that the negative reaction to it is both positive in that we want to discourage that.
Yeah.
And it's not good behaviour. But by the same token, don't go over the top about it. It's what people do. And I think that the supermarkets now have shown us that there's going to be food. The government's not saying they're going to close down supermarkets or ration or any of those things. So this panic will pass after a couple of weeks, and probably going to the supermarket will be a great time to have a social interaction at a distance. People... Yeah, I think people expect too much sometimes, and that leads to panic, but it also leads to getting down on people. And this is not the time to get down on people. Don't get down on people who are coughing. Don't get down on people who've got coronavirus. Don't get down on people whose livelihoods are affected. And don't get down on people who don't appear to be doing something normal, because normal doesn't exist anymore. Normal is all about routines. Routines are gone. So we need to be more tolerant. We need to be more patient, and we need to be more supportive of everyone. And I wish I was hearing that message more from the government, because all I hear about is how far I have to get away from everyone. And that's what breeds panic.
Yeah, exactly. Just as a small anecdotal note, just walking through the supermarket today was a much more pleasant experience.
Exactly.
For the most part, the stock was all there. There was almost a ridiculously overabundant supply of toilet paper there today, funny enough. And just in general, the vibe there was a lot calmer, and it felt a lot more like my usual, visit, where it wasn't going all nuts or whatever. Sorry, go on. Yeah, and so I don't know. Like you said, it's like a return to a bit of normalcy, and and there was I saw another set of messaging, which I thought was quite good around. Yeah, okay, even if we go into lockdown doesn't mean you're not going to be able to walk out the door, go to the shop and buy all that stuff as well. And that's the sort of thing that is important to get out there to reassure those that may be concerned about these things.
Well, if there's one thing that really has upset me, it's the lack of that messaging. We're so heavy on regulation, risk and liability that I think actually that they're completely miscommunicating the situation. And I would actually challenge the government, if you're going to go to these steps with corona, are you going to do this every year with the flu? And the answer would be no. And, well, at least it was in the past. Maybe in the future that'll all change. Maybe it's the end of handshakes and, air kissing and all that sort of stuff. Before, if you look at plagues and pandemics of history, you'll see that they have changed human behaviour over time. I would think that this will have the same effect. But, the way we approach it as humans, the way we approach it if we stay positive and we look at ways to be better humans through this, then really it's a wonderful opportunity for all of us, not only to limit the damage caused by coronavirus, but also by making the world a better place.
Yeah.
Less consumerism, less pollution, less demand of things we don't really need.
Absolutely. And I guess just the final point to finish up on, it kind of illustrates the point of maybe there's a certain amount of complacency that we've had over such a long period of time, where we see a pocket of something bad happening somewhere, and it's easy to feel sympathy for it because it's at a distance and it's not affecting us. But the unique situation that we find ourselves in here is that it's affected everyone all at once, which is unique, at least in very recent history. And that might be more than anything else indicative of how we go forward too, because there's nothing like getting everyone hit at the same time to really snap us all to attention. Exactly.
And, I think there might be a good example of this, probably for every nation, as the virus spread, when it was somewhere else in its early stages, and it wasn't affecting us directly. It makes great TV. You like to think that it's happening somewhere else and you stay up to date because it's a good story. But when it happens to you, it suddenly becomes very different. And I'll throw this in just quickly. The thing is, it was interesting. There were conspiracy theories before it was a problem in Australia. Now I don't hear any conspiracy theories at all because everyone knows it's real and it is a problem for everyone in the world.
Absolutely. All right, we might wrap it up there, and I'm guessing we're going to still be talking about this in the coming weeks, given next week we could be in a different environment again, depending on how things are traveling or not. It depends on how it all plays out.
Exactly. But stay positive, stay tuned, and have a laugh where you can.
Absolutely. All right. So don't forget to check out our website, SciTechCulture.com. You can get all of our links and content there. You can subscribe to our videos on YouTube and Vimeo and our RSS feeds for the audio version. Listen and watch us on any of your devices, and we greatly appreciate your visits to our website and for listening to us. All right. So that's it for this episode. We'll catch you next time.